Respect and trust are earned. I respect and trust my best friend, Nathan. I've watched Nathan do the impossible. He has fixed broken cars. He has a great driving record. I've ridden in the car with him, and I can verify Nathan is a good and safe driver. I have seen it with my own eyes. Driving back from Seattle this weekend, I let my best friend Nathan drive my car for a few miles while I slept. I don't let anyone touch my car. I rarely let people touch my steering wheel, let alone drive my car. But Nathan can drive my car. Nathan has gained my respect and my trust with his actions. So with that thought that Nathan has gained my trust with his actions, let's talk about the Washington State USC game. This weekend, Washington State upset number 5 USC. And we learned so much from this game. I got a ton of hard evidence to take home. Does that make sense? I have not believed in WSU this year. Well, but this game allowed me to make significant conclusions about the Washington State football team. First, I want to say, however, I cannot imagine going to a school that was not competitive. I had this moment sitting there in the third quarter, just realizing how much fun I'm having, and I cannot even fathom going to a school like Kentucky or Oregon State. What's cool about this game was I always believed that WSU had a chance to win the game. And I truly believe Washington State is capable of winning every single game left on their schedule. And that's really encouraging. I don't think they will, but the fact that they could is really cool. So we learned a ton about Washington State's football team this weekend. I've said all season, I'm skeptical of Washington State. I've used language that I actually frankly regret. I called at one point Washington State a college football fraud. And now looking back, I will agree that was extreme. But I felt like they didn't belong in the top 25 because Washington State had not played any teams that were impressive. Washington State was 4-0 with wins over teams that they were supposed to beat easily. Wins over teams that weren't any good. Many people disagreed with my assertion that Boise State is not very good. I do not believe in Boise State. A top 25 team should be able to handle Boise State with no issue. Chris Peterson, their legendary coach, has left. And Boise State, since he left, has not proven themselves. So I would agree, Washington State, they are a good team. But I don't think Washington State, until this weekend, deserved a spot in the top 25. Washington State had not done anything to earn it. Until WSU beat USC, they had no impressive wins. Montana State, Oregon State, Nevada, those were all games that they would obviously win. And again, I have this unpopular opinion that Boise State is no longer a national powerhouse. And I will not respect Boise State until that program wins games nationally. They have to earn my respect. Again, Boise State lost their legendary coach. I'm very skeptical of Boise State, and I was also skeptical of Washington State. I love WSU. I'm a huge fan of WSU. But I don't believe that I had any proof that WSU belonged in the top 25. They won 4 easy games, so what? Now, the USC game changed my opinion in many ways. I believe that a 10-2 season is completely reasonable for WSU. Now, I'd be very surprised if they were undefeated. That would shock me. But beating Washington, Utah on the road, those are really tough games. But I believe 10-2 is a very solid prediction for the Washington State football team. WSU's game this weekend against USC was very informative. We learned a ton about the Cougs. USC is not dominant up front. USC's offensive and defensive lines were dominated by Texas earlier this year. So if WSU had been dominated by USC, I would be extremely worried. Now, I was on the sideline last weekend, and both teams were trading blows. It went back and forth. It was very clear. There were times that WSU would get beat, and I would look at my coworker and say, I would channel my old high school coach and say, weight room. But then WSU would come back and make a big play. So even though I was very skeptical of their offensive and defensive lines, they proved that they can hang with top teams. Earlier this season, I made fun of WSU's size. I said that WSU is too small, and I criticized their offensive and defensive lines. Well, I was actually very much wrong. I am worried about USC up front, but I am not worried about Washington State on the offensive and defensive lines. See, USC and WSU run very different systems. In the pro style that USC runs on offense, size and ability up front are very important. Well, Washington State runs a spread air raid system. This allows Washington State to do more with less. Washington State does not need a huge, dominant offensive line. They spread you out. They worry about speed instead of size. Washington State throws the ball really quickly and exploits you with mismatches. That's not to say USC doesn't worry about winning matchups and getting mismatches. Every football team does. And that's not to say that WSU doesn't worry about, beating you physically and beating you with size. Every football team also wants to do that. But WSU and USC have very different systems where one values speed and strength and size more, and one values mismatches and scheme a little bit more. WSU runs a zone running scheme. USC runs zone, but they also run power and all matter of stuff. USC's strategy, part of it, is to beat you physically. Something that they actually struggle to do because USC is not that big and not that good up front. WSU doesn't rely on beating you physically. Washington State relies more heavily on schemes. Now, the defensive front seven for WSU has looked dominant all year. WSU has been able to get pressure against every single team they have played. USC's in trouble. USC doesn't have a deep threat, so USC is having teams play them with a stacked box. So a team goes up against USC, and their scheme and their plan is, I'm going to stop the run. And USC does not have a receiver good enough to make you pay. They don't have a receiver that can beat you over the top. So Washington State's defensive line was fantastic this weekend. And honestly, WSU's defensive line has played great all year. They got pressure on Boise State. And I think WSU's defensive dominance is going to drop off against better teams. But overall, Washington State's defensive front is not a weakness of WSU, and neither is their offensive line. So what is Washington State's weakness? I've heavily criticized Washington State and said that they lack receivers, and I stand by this. I think that the Washington State receivers have had many, many issues. In fact, I joke privately calling Tavares Martin Jr. Tavares Martin Butterhands. I say the guy can't catch. It doesn't work. I started doing that when he dropped a touchdown in the end zone against Boise State. So Washington State's receivers have struggled with dropping open passes. That's not debatable. That's a fact. Now, last weekend against USC, both Tavares Martin and Kyle Sweets had multiple drops. Drops when they were wide open. And I don't care what you do. You're a doctor. You're a salesman. You're a mechanic. When someone gives you an easy one, when someone gives you a situation in which it's easy to be successful, you have to be successful. Catching a wide open pass is easy. The special guys, they do catch passes when they are double teamed, but they also catch the easy ones. It starts with the easy passes. You must make the routine plays to be great. So Washington State receivers have not consistently made the routine catches this season. But then, as my friend Mark pointed out, if you're going to have a problem, that's probably the best problem to have. You can get better at catching passes. Those are fixable mistakes, and so that's really exciting. Catch the dang ball, let's go. But you can say that to him. That is a fixable problem. So that is an area WSU needs to improve in. They need to catch the ball better, especially when they're wide open. But it's also a fixable mistake, something that WSU can fix and improve on. So Washington State is capable of winning every single game the rest of their season. I think 10-2 is more reasonable prediction. That's kind of where I think they're going to land. But this team is certainly legitimate. WSU is currently ranked 11th in the nation. I think that's exactly where they belong. As teams win and lose around WSU, I think their ranking will fluctuate. They might even make it into the top 10. But I think at the end of the season, WSU will land about 11th or 12th. That's really where they belong. That is their home. That is their spot. And the game this weekend was just incredible. I just want to kind of reminisce. USC does things bigger. I'm on the sideline. I'm like, man, what? They have a huge staff. They have like this city they build on the sideline. They had stuff littered everywhere. And man, this game last weekend, USC Washington State, was a ton of fun. I love Washington State football, and it's really cool to see my favorite team get a big win. I think WSU would go 10-2 this year, and I do believe in them. They are a legitimate team in college football.